What's going on, guys? I thought I would do another top 10 video for you today, and I'm going to do my top 10 favorite story arcs in all of manga. I'm actually surprised that I haven't done this video so far, but this was a little bit of a difficult list to put together, not just to rank my 10 favorite arcs, but also there are some manga series and stories that I don't even look at in a way that I consider them having arcs. Like Goodnight Poon Poon, for example. What are the arcs of Goodnight Poon Poon? Like child Poon Poon, after high school Poon Poon? Like I don't really know where the cutoffs would be, so I'm not really counting that. Same thing with some shonen stories like Full Metal Alchemist, for example. There's a lot of stuff in Full Metal Alchemist I like, and I know you could divide it up in particular segments, but that is kind of one full giant story arc in my opinion. And the things I'm considering for this list are a little bit more along the lines of something you could take out of the series. Even if you do need other parts of the series to understand the arc, it's something that really kind of stands on its own and have something very poignant to say just amongst themselves. Also, I'm sure your list is going to look very different than my list, so feel free to put your list down below as well and comment on mine, and we can just kind of talk about the best that manga has to offer. And of course, again, this is just the manga that I've read so far. I'm going to start this off at number 10 with the Buddha mission from Gantz. I think that this mission in itself is one of the most terrifying and tragic arcs of all of Gantz, and I think it's the one that really showcases just the stakes that can happen within the series of Gantz. Now, when it comes to Gantz, you can pretty much break up every single mission as its own little segment, which is kind of cool because you could kind of come into it at any point and sort of just see that specific mission. They even did that with the Gantz Zero movie. They just took a mission in the middle of the manga and made it into a movie. It might be a little bit hard to understand, but I mean, you could still watch it and it works as a movie. But the Buddha mission was something that just took everything from 0 to 100. The first two missions of Gantz, we learned that it was dangerous. We learned that the stakes were real. We learned that pretty much anybody could die. But the Buddha mission, if you haven't read it, is basically like the eclipse of Gantz, if we're referencing it to Berserk. Like, it is a moment where every single character pretty much just gets absolutely demolished, and the tension that builds within this arc is insane. It had me on the edge of my seat. It's scary, it's horrifying, you really want the characters to survive, and it goes down to like the last minute, the last second. There is no levity whatsoever with the Buddha mission. It is just full on high tension to the very end, and it's something that, as far as reading manga goes, that I'm gonna remember forever. For my number 9, I'm going to go old school, and I'm going to pick the Saiyan arc. I know that Dragon Ball might seem like an obvious pick or maybe an overrated manga, but Dragon Ball is super close to my heart, and legitimately, and I don't feel like I'm just saying this from nostalgia, I don't feel like I'm just saying this because it's popular, I really do think the Dragon Ball manga, the Akira Toriyama original Dragon Ball run, is really well done, especially when it comes to the Saiyan arc, because it does what all great battle shonen should do, and it progresses the story and the characters through the fights. From the beginning of the fights to the end of the fights, the characters change and grow and adapt and basically discover things about themselves, become different people. We have Piccolo's sacrifice, you have Goku accepting his heritage as a Saiyan, and you also have this great dynamic of Goku the Saiyan that was raised on Earth versus Vegeta, who is the Prince of Saiyan, representing what the Saiyans are and the differences between them and the things that have allowed Goku to go beyond what Vegeta could be. Also, what's great about this is that the fights actually feel like they have stakes and that they are exhausting to watch. Like later on in Dragon Ball, where every single villain can pretty much regenerate themselves at any moment. Back in the Saiyan arc, I really feel like you felt the damage, the broken legs, the broken ribs. Every single piece of damage mattered back in the Saiyan arc, and I think it is, to this day, still the best fight in all of Dragon Ball. At my number 8, and again, this one is kind of an awkward one to pick, but I just couldn't in good conscience make a top 10 manga list in any way, shape, or form without including Vagabond, so I'm going to be including the Hosian Temple arc. Again, with Vagabond, it's kind of hard to break up into arcs in my mind, but the Hosian Temple arc was where I fell in love with Vagabond. It has some great messages about facing your fear, finding the calm state, being able to stand up against it, kind of understanding being in the present moment. It has a lot of good Eastern philosophy ideals within it. Also, I think Inshin is a great character for Musashi to fight, especially at this point in his life. It's a serious, like, no holds barred moment. You have two fights, actually. You have Inshin basically dominating in the first half, and you have Musashi falling into the depths of fear and despair and what that can do to somebody, and just sort of his acceptance of whatever happens, happens, and going with the flow and finding the calm, and all of the lessons that are taught within that moment. Also, at the end of it, he finally gets his first actual katana, which is really cool to see. So it's a moment that's going to stay in my mind forever. I almost put the Kojiro backstory arc in this spot. They were very, very close. It was kind of neck and neck, but ultimately I went with this one. Now, my number 7 pick, I'm going to put the prologue arc, or the war arc, whatever you want to call it, from Vinland Saga. I think that this opening arc of Vinland Saga is something that is very, very special, and is something that all Vinland Saga fans are going to remember forever. And to a lot of people, it's something that the peaks still have not ever gotten close to matching. You have the beginning of the story with Thorfinn having his father killed, winding up in the mercenary band, and also you have the great character of Askeladd, who has a ton of depth to him, an interesting backstory, controversial viewpoints on life, but also he's a character that is just so cunning and understanding. He's a great leader, but at the same time, he has this darkness to him that he kind of embraces when he needs to. The more that you discover about him, he really just becomes, I think, one of the best characters that I have ever read. Not to mention the fact in this arc, you get great moments like Thorkel just being a beast. You get the ideas, the beginning of the ideas that Thor's eventually wanted to hand down. You start to think, what does it mean to be a true warrior? What does it mean that a true warrior needs no sword? How do you do that in a world that's dominated by violence, that's so intense that it's integrated into the culture? And we're just kind of brought into this world. There's like the politics going on in the background. There's just so much happening within this first arc of Vinland Saga that it's just completely memorable, and something that I think is truly special. And again, could probably work on its own as just its own story. Obviously, there's a lot more to tell with the Thorfinn character, but if you wanted to end it on a tragedy, it kind of works. Now, my number 6 pick is going to be the Chapter Black arc from Yu Yu Hakusho, and I know some people are going to say that I'm crazy. If I'm going to include a Yu Yu Hakusho arc, why isn't it the Dark Tournament? I honestly, look, I love the Dark Tournament. I think it's both 10 out of 10s, but if you're asking me personally, I do lean towards Chapter Black, because I think this is where Togashi was first starting to step out of the box, starting to do things that are a little bit outside of the norm of what you would see in shonen, starting to play and experiment with these ideas that he would eventually kind of cement within Hunter x Hunter, not just with the power systems of characters having territories, but having a villain like Sensui, who obviously wants to eradicate all of humanity, but at the same time, you kind of understand his reasonings, you kind of understand why he's doing this. He's psychologically damaged, he's a complex character, and things just keep unraveling in such a crazy way within this arc. It's almost like every other chapter there's some kind of twist or turn, and it doesn't let up. I love the moment where Kurama is forced to take out Game Master. You see the reservation on his face, but then you see him just completely zone into it, knowing that it's something that he has to do and he has to make that sacrifice. And it's just, I don't know, there's so many great moments like that I just really, really appreciate this arc, and I just slightly put it above the Dark Tournament. My number 5 pick is going to be the Kyoto arc from Rurouni Kenshin. This is the arc that cemented Rurouni Kenshin in my mind as one of my favorite manga of all time. And the reason why I love this arc so much is because I really feel like almost every single character has a complete shift and a complete learning experience while going through this arc. They all go on their separate journeys. I love how the arc starts just out of the blue. Saito shows up and just challenges Kenshin. You think he's the antagonist, but that's just the lead-in to what's actually going on. And there's this like underground group looking to overthrow Japan. And when it comes to Makoto Shishio as a villain, again, one of my favorite villains of all time, and he has a point. He comes from a world where only the strong has survived, and he gave his life to this government that he did all of these dirty jobs for, and then they betrayed him, and then he views like the people that are in charge are too weak to be in charge of Japan, and Japan should actually be in the hands of somebody who's he believes is competent and strong, and somebody to kind of take advantage of this, and that it shouldn't be run by backstabbers that'll just shoot you in the head when they're done with you. And he has a point, and part of it would throw Japan into chaos, which causes the conflict, but on one hand, you kind of understand where he's coming from. as well with other characters that are following him, like Sojiro. I think that he has a really tragic backstory, and it makes sense that he was kind of indoctrinated with the thinking and the mindset of Shishio. Kenshin discovers things about himself, goes through his final training, and comes to the realization that the will to live and staying alive is a lot better than trying to sacrifice yourself for some greater ideal or not caring that you're going to die. There's just so many things. Aoshi and what he goes through, there's just so many things that happen here within this story arc, and to me, it's always going to be a 10 out of 10. At my number 4 spot, I have the Chimera Ant arc from Hunter x Hunter. I don't really know what else you could say about Chimera Ant. Again, I think it's Togashi taking ideas that he played with in Yu Yu Hakusho and then just going 1000% with them and actually sticking the landing in a way that I never thought he could. Chimera Ant goes through such a shift from beginning to end. It's definitely the darkest arc. It's definitely the most brutal arc. It introduces what I think probably, in my opinion, is the second greatest antagonist of all time with Meruem. And the storyline with him and Komogi is just so heart-wrenching and touching. And you see the parallel between Meruem kind of like discovering humanity, but at the same time you have Gon, who is slowly losing his willingness to just sacrifice everything for just one moment and destroying himself. I always think of Gon's transformation in this arc kind of like the anti-Super Saiyan transformation, where it's like it's not a happy, positive, progressive thing of unlocking your potential. It's actually like the worst possible thing he could do. Just literally destroying himself for one moment of power. It's insane. And I just can't believe that the Chimera Ant arc is able to stick the landing. The finale, the climax of Chimera Ant is just so fantastic, and it makes the entire journey feel worthwhile. My number 3 is going to be the Slave arc from Vinland Saga. I think, to me, this is what made Vinland Saga reach my top 5 manga of all time. It is definitely the development of Thorfinn, and I never really knew that I could care so much about 2 characters trying to grow wheat, but after reading it, I just want to go find a cabin in the woods and just create a farm and just start my own farm arc. It's just something that I really want to do now. It introduces a great character with Einar, the friendship between him and Thorfinn, and just seeing Thorfinn in this state of just depression and defeat, and seeing him kind of slowly rise out of it and slowly find a purpose in life and find a reason to keep living. I think that even if you can't relate specifically to the events that are happening in the story, I think that, and maybe I'm crazy, but I really do think reading the Slave arc of Vinland Saga is something to kind of help you through dark times in your own life. I think a lot of the messages and themes that are the undertones of what Thorfinn is going through is something that we all need to think about. And I really do think it's a great message to share. Not to mention it has, Knut's crazy glow up, and it has the moment with Garnar and his wife Arnid, and the tragic ending to that. I just can't, bro. Like, it's just so good, and it's my number 3. My number 2 spot is going to be the Conviction arc from Berserk. Definitely, I think both simultaneously. I think this is the darkest and, in a way, the most uplifting arc of Berserk, because you have Guts in his full Black Swordsman persona and just him willing to absolutely destroy his body to defeat apostles, and the fight with Rosine, which is still my favorite fight in all of Berserk. But then also his sort of conviction and understanding of how important Casca is to him, which is the catalyst for him to basically take this shift into being the protector once more, instead of just aimlessly going out destroying his body in order to get some semblance of revenge. But because of that, he has to enter into Albion and go up the Tower of Conviction, where we have Malzgis, who I think is the second best villain in Berserk, and just his complete conviction once again to the religion of the Holy See. And the scariest thing about Malzgis is that he's doing all of these horrible things, torturing people, but he truly believes that what he's doing is right, and that God will come save you, and that when he turns into a pseudo-apostle, he believes it's a blessing from God. And also just the entire event just leading to this giant mass of evil and darkness taking down the tower. Everything about this arc, and especially when Guts finally gets to Casca again and finally holds her in his arms, and there's just this moment of just pain, sadness, regret, and I don't know. I live for this panel right here. I love it so much, and it's just the best. And my number one is probably pretty obvious, but my number one is the Golden Age arc of Berserk. I do think that you could take the Golden Age just as its own story. Yeah, it has a tragic, horrible ending, but it is an ending in many ways. I think the Golden Age arc stands on its own. It is the best story arc I have ever read. Every time I read it, I get something more out of it. I think the development of Guts from the loner, first you see his backstory, and then you see him as a loner, joining the Band of the Hawk, finding some purpose, falling in love. You get all of that, not to mention the rise to power of Griffith and the Band of the Hawk. You get to discover Griffith as a character. It's still the only arc of Berserk where you really get the most in-depth of Griffith and Casca as characters, which of course all leads to the eclipse, which is the signifying, most horrific and memorable and powerful moment of the entire series. It's it's the moment. It's what everyone remembers, and it's the catalyst for every single thing that comes after it. But I think the Golden Age arc is full of great moments, great fights, Guts versus 100 men, but then you also have moments like Wounds, where Guts is able to open up to Casca and vice versa, and they're able to accept and embrace each other in their most vulnerable moments, which is just a very powerful, raw thing to see in a manga. I also like how a lot of the supernatural stuff is kept in a very low level during the Golden Age. Don't get me wrong, I like as Berserk goes forward and we have more monsters and more magic and stuff, but there is something very scary about the idea that these supernatural things and demons exist, but it's kind of behind the scenes. Like, some people know, some people don't. When Zod shows up, it's like there's rumors of him, but people don't really know. And I love the conversation Guts and Griffith have after that, where it's like Griffith kind of just accepts it. Like, it makes sense that there's things beyond human understanding out there, which just kind of leads into eventually what happens to him. And it also makes the eclipse feel that much more scary and that much more terrifying, is that we don't really have a whole lot of supernatural stuff until that moment. We also have Wild, so there's that. But no, I think the Golden Age arc is just peak writing, just in general. Like, not even manga, not even anything, just writing, character work in general, themes, ideas, progression, development, everything. I think it's perfect. I honestly do think the Golden Age is a 10 out of 10. People throw around 10 out of 10s or 100% or S tier, a lot. I don't really do that. I reserve that for things that I really feel deserve it. And in any category, I would put the Golden Age at the top. Anyways, guys, there you go. That is my current top 10 favorite story arcs in manga, excluding some manga that I feel is just kind of one giant story arc that I don't really feel like you can separate. But beyond that, these are my top 10. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Be very curious to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys for watching this video. Give it a thumbs up and a comment if you enjoyed it to help it in the algorithm. Also, if you want to help support the channel, I do have links below for channel memberships and my Patreon, as well as a merch store. And you can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and all that, just at Real Life Ryan. Other than that, guys, hope you have a wonderful day. I'll talk to you next time.